Welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sport. It is Wednesday afternoon. We are less than 24 hours away from the eagerly anticipated team announcement that Rassie Erasmus will do tomorrow of the Springboks team to take on the All Blacks this weekend. All Blacks are actually going to be about 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. The BOKS set to announce their team about 2 hours later. So this time tomorrow we will have both teams announced and we'll be able to talk about them as well. So we've been doing live shows every single day this week, and very, very cool to engage with fellow fans and talk about the sort of the state of rugby, really. And we've had a lot to address, and a very big announcement yesterday. Well, not a formal announcement, but a confirmation of the sort of Springbok versus All Black tours that will begin in a few years' time. The first tour set to happen in 2026. Now, it's been a very interesting reaction to that sort of confirmation, really, of the memorandum of understanding, and both from Springbok and All Black fans, as well as sort of general fans. Obviously, a lot to talk about with regards to scheduling and how it's going to work and how it's going to affect everything else. For example, like the Rugby Championship and incoming tours and the likes of that. As well as, is this good for rugby, for example? Are we talking about a really positive move, or are we talking about something which might actually be quite negative in the long run? As well as kind of why these tours have to happen, or why these tours are going to happen. You know, what's the thinking behind them, how they're going to work, and the likes. We'll also talk a little bit about Springbok training, because we were inside the stadium today, and we got confirmation of a bunch of players that are training, the likes of Stephen Kitsov, who is at training, Kenan Moody at training, Marnie Liebach back with the BOKS as well as Sia Khaleesi, who trained today, and as far as we understand, could very well still be in the selection frame for this weekend. We don't know if you train on Sunday. On Monday, for example, the policy is if you don't train on Monday, you don't get selected. That was kind of the reason that Vincent Koch, for example, was left out in that Rugby World Cup finals. He wasn't ready for Monday. Trevor Nyakani got the nod. So that is the team policy. You don't train on Monday, you don't come into selection. So, for example, if we look at last week with the Eben Etzebeth situation, he did train on the Monday and trained every single day. And so there was no issue in him being selected, for example, as per the team policy, because he had trained all the time, and that was an issue. So we wait to find out exactly whether he will play tomorrow. Hopefully we might be able to get, we're not going to get a coaching update today, unfortunately, but we might be able to get an update from them in the Springbok camp. Yeah, you know, as soon as we do, we'll let you guys know what the situation is there. But yeah, so, you know, all the players that left for Currie Cup duty, they are back with the BOKS. So like your Kenan Moody's, your Stephen Kitsov, Marnie Liebach, I think it was Maximo Pimpy as well. Yeah, Pimpy also went back. He's back in the mix. So all of those players will be in the selection frame for this weekend. We're not sure, for example, if Sam Murat is fit, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how this team all looks tomorrow morning. But yeah, that's a bit of an update from the training, and we'll have a press conference coming to you in about an hour's time. It starts at 2:15, so about more 2 hours time. I think the players that we've got in that press conference are as follows. I believe it is Cheslin Colby and Akanya Am for today, which might suggest Akanya Am, for example, in the selection frame. And we will also have an interview with Damian Delinda, which will come out on Sunday. So just in terms of the content, that is what you got to look forward to today. Tomorrow we will have Springbok team announcement as well as the All Black team announcement. We will have press conferences from both coaches. We will have clips from players as well, and sets of training for both teams as well. And then Friday, obviously, is captain's run day, so we'll have content from the Springboks team photo, as well as the captain's run, as well as the captain's press conference, which is usually Stondile Stick and the Springbok captain, whoever's the captain on the day. Hopefully it's going to be Sia Khaleesi, and we'll also have a pitch side interview from the All Blacks captain, which you imagine is going to be Scott Barrett. But let's get into this tour idea, shall we? And I'm going to bring up the article, which was actually broken by... Oh, let me not do that. It was from Daily Maverick. And so we'll go look at the original article and give them their due for being the ones to sort of break the news that everything had been decided, and that it is basically all systems go for this tour over here, which is set to happen in 2026. So before we get into that, I've got a poll running asking, do you think this is a good idea? A very simple yes or no answer. and I want to hear what you guys think about the whole idea of this tour, which is going to happen in 2026 and 2030, and then 2034, and then 2038, and the likes. So Craig Ray was the journalist that broke the news, and there are quotes from Rian Olberholzer, who is the CEO of SA Rugby. So it has all been fully fully researched and confirmed, and so it is very legitimate. So let's go have a look, shall we, at the article itself. Right, so here we go. So the big thing is, it's a go. Springboks the All Blacks to resume full tours in 2026. And the main thing is that formal agreement has been reached. Is going to be called the greatest rugby rivalry. That is what the tours are going to be called at this stage. Apparently, it is a working title, confirmed by Rian Olberholzer, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the situation. There will be 8 matches, including 3 tests, as well as 4 matches against the URC clubs and 1 match against an SAA side, which will be the first full tour, which will happen in 2026. The first time since 1996, and will mark 30 years since the end of the old sort of traditional tours that we used to have. So basically, it's there's also a 4th test, by the way, that's going to be staged outside, likely to be in either London or in America, and it will not form part of the series. And apparently, so the article is saying that there are broad details of a deal, and then basically it's going to strengthen the connection, yada yada yada. Why are we doing this? This is the biggest question, and it's going to definitely upset a few people from terms of other nations, but the main reason is financial, and that is very, very simply the be all and end all of this entire thing. This is going to make a large amount of money. We're talking about the 2 biggest rugby brands in the world doing proper tours. 3 tests, for example. I mean, we're talking about the biggest match in the world. That's not going to happen 3 times in a 3-test series. We don't get 3-test series against the All Blacks. If we're lucky, we get 3-test series against Northern Hemisphere sides when they come touring in incoming tours. So we never, unfortunately, get those sort of 3-match series against New Zealand, because they're kind of all in for All Blacks Rugby Championship, which is 2 matches. Now, I think a lot of people would kind of argue that they would almost prefer to see a 3-match test series instead of the Rugby Championship, which in many ways, I suppose, is kind of fair enough in terms of that really big rivalry that, really, how do you determine who's the best? Because often especially in the last few years, we've kind of won one, lost one, won one, lost one. And now we get to have a series you win. You get to if you beat them twice and even lose them a 3rd time, there's no doubt about it. So whether the Freedom Cup, for example, becomes a thing, I imagine that will kind of be part of it. I don't know if that's going to change with regards to how it's won. Maybe the Freedom Cup becomes an every 4-year thing. Maybe these tours become the kind of the Freedom Cup tour, where your 3-match series decides who keeps it for 4 years, for example. I don't think they'll go that route, but it would be an interesting concept, wouldn't it? Because it's far more reflective in terms of having to win the series, 2-1 or 3-0, or if you draw one and you draw the series, then you draw it. Like we saw the British and Irish Lions series drawn back in 2017 between the All Blacks and the Lions. So I mean that could be something that kind of goes into it. So there's still a lot of finer details that we've got to sort of iron out, really. And apparently last week, as mentioned over here, so SA Rugby New Zealand leaders met in Johannesburg, and they finalised the details of the resumption of the tours. So this is what Rian Olberholzer had to say. He said, "I just spent 2 days with the New Zealand leadership in what we are calling the greatest rugby rivalry." He said, "It's a working title, although some people might say it's arrogant to say that. We have signed a memorandum of understanding and we are in the planning phases now. We have a draft schedule that must still be agreed. This is the main thing. We met with commercial brokers on setting the commercial property, the sponsorship matrix, and we will go to market in due course. We believe we have to be in the broadcast market soon. It's a collaboration of 2 unions that have been agreed to work together off the field. We believe we have to be closer, and we have never been closer. Let's fight on the field and let's work off the field to the betterment of both of the unions. We have such a challenge in rugby with funding, so we have to create our own opportunities, and that is what we are busy with at the moment." Very, very interestingly is the sharing agreement. So apparently the income in terms of the commercial value and broadcasting rights will be shared evenly, although the home union will take a larger share of the ticket and match day revenue. So, your broadcast rights, your big sponsorships, for example, that is all going to be shared. The home union will take the ticket revenue, or a bigger share of the ticket revenue, which is fair enough. They want to try and sell the tickets on the ground themselves. In terms of how big the stadiums are, there's obviously going to be a difference between South African stadiums and New Zealand stadiums in terms of size and stuff like that. But I do like the fact that it is going to be a shared income, because otherwise you're only really making a lot of money out of this every 8 years, whereas the now every 4 years, for example, you're going to get that money into the bank. So I think that's a very good part of it as well. Apparently, this is the kind of the biggest thing that's currently being discussed in terms of how it's all going to work. So, because obviously there's sponsorship partners that they're going to clash. For example, broadcasting partners. That's why we've got the Lipovitan, what's the Rugby Championship when it's over in Australia versus the Steinlager in New Zealand often, and then we've got the Castle Lager down here, and the Rugby Championship changes name depending on where it is. Same as the URC. I think it's the BKT or BRT or whatever it is, URC overseas, and the Vodacom URC in South Africa. So different sort of sponsorships depending on the region, because certain brands are obviously not in other countries. Castle Lager makes no sense for them to pay to have the international sort of sponsorship name for URC when it's not available overseas. So that is obviously a big part of it. In terms of apparently part of the negotiation is what is sacred. They're apparently looking at ticket pricing in terms of, and also sort of the scheduling. Apparently they're looking at the Lions model, and they're going to start around the coast, come back, play the test matches, and then one out of South Africa before the series start. What's going to be interesting is the fact that the one out of South Africa might be the one before the test series, which I don't particularly like. You're going to arrive here, you're going to play against the Lions, Sharks, Stormers, and Bulls. You're going to play the SAA, then you're going to leave to America, play a match, and then come back for the test series. Not a massive fan of that, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I'd rather that one-off be a different day, different time, even a different month. But even if that becomes part of the end-of-year tour type of thing. So I'm not a massive fan of that part. This is the big controversy, isn't it? It is the Rugby Championship and what's going to happen to Argentina and Australia. So obviously those two unions are not going to be happy with this, because they're suddenly going to miss out on so much revenue with the Rugby Championship. The thinking at the moment is that on these years, much like Rugby World Cup years, the Rugby Championship becomes a single round tournament. And so you've got, and maybe you sort of make one of the series matches, or even though the match outside of neutral venue, for example, you make that the South Africa versus New Zealand game, and then you play one game against Australia, one game against Argentina. So a single sort of round, not home and away, three rounds, match against each union, winner takes all after that type of situation. That's obviously a very big problem, because when Argentina and Australia play against the All Blacks and play against the Springboks, they make a lot more money, and they're now going to lose out on two matches. An additional two matches every 2 years. I mean, already lost out on those two matches during World Cup years. So, and that's two matches on each. So it's 4 matches in totals. So Rian Overholz has said that the Rugby Championship will still happen, but it'll probably be a single round, which is what they are pushing for. He said, if it's not going to happen, did say to Argentina and Australia that we will play one of test matches against them. That is a discussion that we need finally in the second week of September. So that is still going to be a discussion. A lot of this, for example, is after things broke down between SA Rugby and New Zealand Rugby, because we got kicked out of Super Rugby. Somebody the other day said, we never kicked you out. Yes, you did. New Zealand did very much kick South Africa out of Super Rugby. They were kind of went with the area tour method, and they had different ideas of what's going to happen, and they basically kind of said, right, cool, well, we're going to leave you guys out there. And I don't think they really realized what the impact of SA Rugby was. So it was in July that New Zealand Rugby announced it would break away from SANS and form a new Super Rugby competition which excluded South Africa. And there was a report that, for example, talked about the feasibility, etc. And since then, there's been a lot of regret about that, because South Africa made the move to Europe, where we've had to struggle a little bit in terms of financial things in the first few seasons, but are now about to become full members of the URC and full members of the EPCR, and we will start to receive the revenue directly from those competitions, and we'll probably receive a lot more revenue than was ever possible with the old sort of Super Rugby model. So this is kind of a bit of like a going back to relationships. And at the end of the day, it's all about finances. Is this the best thing for World Rugby? World Rugby, probably not. This is not going to be a good thing for Australia Rugby. This is not going to be a good thing for Argentina Rugby. Is this going to be a massively good thing for both these unions? 100%. And the problem is, the reality in terms of the feasibility of rugby is you've got to be selfish at the moment. We've been propped up on lots of reserves, on big sponsorship deals, and if the British and Irish Lions series hadn't happened, for example, SA Rugby could potentially have been broke. And they've had to take a lot of money out of from the likes of Supersport, for example. That's why they're going to get that access with Chase to the Sun. And they kind of kept SA Rugby going. Now they're looking at how do they find the revenue moving forward, and this is going to make stupid amounts of money. There's talk about the new Nations Championship, for example. Now, what's going to do to that? I don't think anybody cares. About the Nations Championship, which is kind of that whole like Nations League type of the Rugby Championship, Six Nations, as well as the Alternation Series, kind of all feed into a semi-final, final weekend type of thing. That was the one that was going to be potentially funded by Qatar, and yeah, it's kind of on ice at the moment because it was rejected. The Qatar bid was rejected, so they're going to look at something different. So we'll wait and see exactly how that all plays out. But obviously, this also makes that very, very complicated from a scheduling point of view, because you're talking about now you can play midweek games, but you're talking about at least about a 4 or 5 week tour, probably about a 4-week tour, where you'll probably play an SAA game on a Saturday, for example. You might go like a Bulls Saturday, Lions Wednesday, Sharks Saturday, Stormers Wednesday, SAA Saturday, Test series kind of thing. So that's what, 2 weeks, about 5 weeks tour. That's kind of probably what we'll probably see. So in terms of the Rugby Championship, that's why it makes it so complicated, because if you were to start a tour at the beginning of August, it only ends the first week of September. And then again, you could then have the rest of September, because we do play the Rugby Championship August, September. That's when the Rugby Championship is. So that's probably that's the most likely window for this. And it's quite nice because, the British Irish Lions series are interesting ones because they happen in the July window, which means that the team they're playing against, especially because it's in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the first time they're playing together that year, because the season starts then. This, for example, could be very different because you've got a situation of they'll play an incoming series. So say South Africa might have Wales here, and we might play 2 tests against Wales and a test against Fiji. And then we go into these tours. Now, what will be interesting is, and what I really hope is that we do see the players being released back to the unions, and they get to play against the All Blacks for their unions, and then come into the Springboks setup and play for the BOKS, which is what you see during the British and Irish Lions series, and that's what we want to see here as well. We didn't see it as much because of COVID, but that's obviously not going to be an issue in these coming tours, hopefully. So that itself is also quite an interesting concept. The fact that it's not going to be a cold Springbok team. It's going to be a Springbok side that would have played for a couple of times already that year and will be ready for it as well. And so it's an interesting one, isn't it? So in terms of is this a bad thing or a good thing for rugby? And this is obviously going to be the big question. As mentioned, it's going to be a huge thing for SA Rugby and New Zealand Rugby. And I think at the time, we have to be selfish. We've seen a lot of talk, for example, from Ireland and France. They rejected that the Qatar proposal with the Nations Championship. They were the only 2 teams that did. And they, unsurprisingly, are the 2 teams that aren't struggling financially. So they don't need the Nations Championship. They don't need that sort of injection of money that can potentially come from that whole proposal. So it was a frustrating situation because you've got like a Scotland and a Wales, especially Wales, for example, who are in the mud at the moment, and they're desperate for alternative forms of income and to find ways of keeping their rugby program going and to funding it. But they're being crippled by teams that don't need the income making the decisions. So it's a frustrating situation to be in for these things. And that's the main thing as well. I think, when that gets rejected, SA Rugby as well are going to sit there saying, well, if that's going to be sort of on the rocks, we need to find other ways. Because at the end of the day, running rugby costs a lot of money. We've been bleeding money a lot with the URC and EPCR. Hopefully we'll start to make that money back. But, we've got a massive women's tournament that we're going to start rolling out, where we're going to try and professionalize our entire women's setup and have I think it's a 5 or 6 team women's league. And there's all going to be centrally contracted players, and then there's going to kind of be like an auction type of thing. And these players are going to be distributed amongst the different unions and franchises, which is a really good thing. We've got to get our women's side to being one of the top teams in the world, because why can't it be? We've got to get our under-20s into being the best teams in the world. Now, how do we get that right, for example? Is investing into the Varsity Cup system? Do we need to invest more into our under-20 concept? Do we need more academies, for example? We've got the Western Province Rugby Institute, and you've got the Sharks Academy. Lions don't really have an academy. It's kind of just the Lions junior structures. Similarly with the Bulls, don't really have a Bulls Academy as much. Do we need more academies, and how does that look? Are you going to have a Pumas Academy, a Greekwood Academy, how do you get EP Rugby right? Look at the talent coming out of EP Rugby. Makazoloma Pimpi, Lekanya continue to be like the big sort of exports, but Fassi as well is also an export of the EP. So you've got to get that right as well, and all of this costs money. It's all money at the end of the day. And so we can't sit there and say, we've got to really think about what is this going to do to Australia rugby, because at the end of the day, we need to kind of be selfish to a certain degree. We're playing against like the likes of Portugal. I think all for that, play against tier 2 nations. Lots of people talk about the fact that, we need to help the African nations develop. Well, they voted against us for the Rugby World Cup. So as far as I'm concerned, no. You had your chance. You voted against us for the Rugby World Cup. You were one of the reasons we didn't get our Rugby World Cup. So I've got zero feeling that we need to help, Central African teams and the likes, to try and build up their rugby. Until they're aligned and until they come in clutch and they start backing us, we're not going to support them either. I think that's fair. Let's go to some of the comments and see what people have to say. And we're talking about this over here. David says, for the smack talk between the two nations, we clearly love playing each other. 94% so far, 85% down. We are slightly down from that. And TVPC said, New Zealand want this because Super Rugby is no good. T. Chambers saying, more isn't more. Maybe they should play each other every other weekend. That'll be exciting. I mean, it's every 4 years that we're going to go from playing 2 games to 3 games. I don't think it's that much suddenly more from a Springboks All Blacks thing. I'm really excited about what the opportunity for our teams to play. I want to see Lions playing against the All Blacks. How cool is that? That's what I'm more excited about. Probably actually more than the 3 test series, to be perfectly honest. Albert says, throwing a Barbarian warm-up game during the week for the All Blacks tour would be great. Petrus says, France, Ireland, possibly England look after their own interest. 100%. Everybody else does, so why can't we? TVPC said, should be called the Great Money Spinner. Well, you can call the top 14 that. You could call the Nations Championship that. It is what it is. As I said, I've seen the finances, and they're not looking good. They're not looking good. We have bled so much money afterwards. And, this is a union that's struggling financially to stay afloat, despite funding so little of the women's game and not funding nearly enough of the junior game. We're all in on the Springboks. Our sevens has suffered. Our women's structures have suffered, and we need to sort that out. JP says, just think back to 2018 when transformation was such a big issue. Now Rassi can pick a backline of Grant, Sasha, Oren, Pimpi, Willem, Moody, Colby, Fassia, no one but Bat and I. 100%. Albert says, it's not like Australia and Argentina coming up with ideas to help their situation. I mean, if you look at Australia, for example, their rugby is in a crisis. It really is in a crisis. So, to a certain degree, to sit there going, well, we're not even sure if these guys are going to be competitive or it's going to be, feasible to be going to Australia for much longer. Can we sit there? Can we rely on them? Can we rely on what's going to happen in Australia? Because rugby is really struggling there. So, you're not going to sit there and now turn down millions in revenue to support a union in Australia, which is at the moment really struggling and kind of dying. Argentina are always the one that's on the short end of the stick because they're a little bit like South Africa, are sitting in South America with no other teams who are remotely close to them from a competitive point of view. We saw Chile at the World Cup, we saw Uruguay, but they're nowhere near the level of Argentina. And I don't know how you get that right. That's a bit of a South American problem. I don't know what the solution is. I'm not going to try and pretend I know what the solution is, because I just don't know enough about South American rugby, and I'm not going to try. But that is also a big problem. A couple people talking about forward selection this weekend. Temba saying on forwards, my sense Thomas Toy gets the nod to start as well as kicks off on second half. Stennekamp seems likely to be the one dropped. And then Craig, CJ Sam is saying South African Rugby Union was financially strongest when there was still interest in the Currie Cup and stadiums would be full towards the end of tournaments like the early and mid 2000s. Yeah, a long time ago though, to be fair. Things have changed. Michael says, if we compete in South and North, can only be good for our boys to be in the best island and New Zealand, our biggest rivalries. And Herman saying, All Blacks tour should include matches against Pumas, Griquas, Cheetahs, and a combination of the B section. Yeah, I think that just starts getting far too complicated. You know, you're not adding in three more matches. You know, you might say instead of the Lions matches and Wolves matches, stuff like that. But again, from a product point of view, do we really want to watch All Blacks versus the Griquas instead of watching the All Blacks versus the Stormers? Think about the ticket sales at the DHL Stadium, Stormers versus All Blacks. That's going to be sold out. Even Lions versus All Blacks was going to sell a lot of tickets. And that's the main thing, isn't it? Again, it's always the financial ramifications. What's the financial benefit? That is the main reason for this, and that's going to be the point of reference at all times in terms of the ideas. Lindell says, New Zealand and Australia rugby is progressively getting worse over time. Super Rugby disaster. And Manaf says, you are so correct. We need to be selfish and stop being concerned about what other unions think about us. World Rugby already seem to have a slight agenda against us. Daku's throwing in an early score prediction, saying 33-23 to the BOKS. And JP saying, our schools are so strong. Why do we struggle in the World Cup? Is it purely coaching, or is our schools not as good as we think? I think it's a mixture. I think our schools are strong, but I do think that we're not getting the right players from a scouting point of view or a pipeline point of view. I think there's a problem from schoolboy to under 20s in terms of getting the right players from that into that system. I don't think it's just a coaching problem. You know, we have changed coaches, but I felt sorry for Fun and Clear because I think the systems aren't good enough at this stage to make sure we're getting the best players into the systems and into the team. So I think they need to fix the pipeline in that. You know, a whole bit of a rehaul, which I think they will do. But maybe our schools aren't as strong as we think we are. But I think there's no doubt when we see the school tours and stuff like that, we always seem to do pretty well in them. So there's definitely no shortage of talent. So yeah, that's interesting. We're going to call up there, people. We're going to wrap it up today. And again, as mentioned, we'll have a press conference for you in about an hour's time, just over an hour, featuring Lekanya and Ches and Colby, which could be an indication that we might see Lekanya this weekend. So yeah, what do you think about that? But please do like the video on the way out, and also subscribe to the channel if you're new. On the road to 80,000 subscribers. We're past 75,000, hoping to get to 76 before the weekend, maybe 77 after the weekend. And try and get to 80,000 by maybe the end of the Rugby Championship if things go well. So please do support us there, and we will see you guys all tomorrow for a team announcement day for both teams. It's going to be a busy day. Settle in. Make sure you've got your Wi-Fi working. If you're on data, make sure you buy enough, because tomorrow it's going to be content on content on content. We do have training up from the BOKS, and you can go and see exactly who's floating around there, like Sia Khaleesi, Kane Moody, Stephen Kitsoff. They're all in